वर्षों की मेहनत के बाद आज दोनों देशों के बीच कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव इकोनॉमिक एंड ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट संपन्न हुआ है।
And we both know this is the biggest and most economically significant trade deal that the UK has made since leaving the EU.
Hello and welcome to a special show. India and the UK has signed a free trade agreement as part of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's UK visit. PM Modi met with British PM Starmer at the Chequers, and Modi said that the agreement will enhance trade and economic partnership between India and UK. Hailing the trade agreement, UK PM Starmer said that this is the biggest and the most economically significant trade deal that UK has made since leaving EU. And to discuss about India-UK FTA with me, Swaminathan Aiyar, consulting editor ET Now, is joining on the same. Mr. Aiyar, welcome to ET Now. My first question to you is, bilateral trade currently stands at $21 to $24 billion with targets to hit $120 billion by 2030. Is that leap realistic? What must happen to the bridge that gap is there?
Well, yeah, I mean, to say it's historic, I think, is a clear exaggeration. It's a useful thing. We live in a world right now where trade barriers are going up. And it's happening all over the place, not just in the USA. Others in retaliation are putting theirs up. We ourselves have retaliated. On some occasions, we have put ours up. So when you get any agreement where there is a significant amount of liberalization of trade, I would say it's welcome. I would add that, once upon a time, if you go back to the 1950s, Britain was our largest trading partner. Today, it's not even in the top 10. So it has fallen away in importance. The old colonial connection is completely severed. And Britain itself has has suffered a substantial amount of deindustrialization. And if you ask what are the main exports of England's, somebody will say Premier League football or The Economist. It does export Scotch whiskey, of course, and that is one of the things which figures. So Scotch whiskey, the duty is going to come down from 150% to 75%, subsequently maybe to 40. That still gives plenty of protection for Indian industry. For anybody who's worried, I need to emphasize that we now have 2 or 3 artisanal whiskey companies in India, which in blind tasting have beaten everybody else. Now, of course, we are not mass producing these things. I mean, Indri will have a small batch run. It's not like the continuous mass production of some famous Scotch names. But we are competitive and we are high class, even in something like whiskey. So I welcome the increased competition out there too. India itself will benefit significantly in various ways.
Well, indeed, exactly my next question. Which sector is poised to benefit the most after this deal?
Now, listen, at the end of it all, bilateral, this freeing of trade will change things. But if already the UK is not among your top 10 trading partners, you cannot expect this to really change the whole scenario. If already the trade is low, it means that the complementarity between the two countries is not that high. It's much higher with China, it's much higher with the USA, much less with the UK. So the overall scope for trade is limited, but we're increasing it. And I said, every increase is a good thing. For Indians who we have all often talked about improving the conditions for Indians to move to the UK for work. This used to be one of the things that was holding up an agreement. There we've got a good deal. Indians can work in 35 sectors for 2 years without any office. And that means that you can land up there and just work from your residence with Zoom. And you can be functioning without going through all the all the difficulties of actually setting up a formal sector thing. And there is an exemption for social security. This is important. A significant part of your salary, anything you earn when your people go to the UK, will be cut and goes towards your long-term pension. And we have been saying, but look, our fellows are going there to do IT or other work for 1 year, for 2 years, for 3 years. So there is no point they're paying into Social Security when they will get nothing out of it. When they retire, you have to work a very large number of years before you can get it. So earlier they resisted it. And they said, we are not going to do this. The United States still has not given you this. But Britain has given what the United States has not given. And this is a useful thing. If I do not know the exact rates of the deduction for different categories, but I mean, they could be 10, 15%, or sometimes 20% of your salaries that went in these various deductions. If that gets reduced, there is that much more that these Indian professionals there will be able to send home. So that is a positive thing.
Right, but list is long when it comes to some labor intensive sectors, be it from auto ancillary to leather to processed food, but which can be the biggest beneficiary according to you?
There is, the government is anxious to emphasize that, in the artisanal sector, people who are working labor-intensive sectors like leather or textiles or auto ancillaries. And so it hopes that there will be this kind of job creation. I would just say in the long run, we need to look away from the labor-intensive field. Our comparative advantage is in skills. We are very competitive in skills. We are not competitive on labor costs for things like the large number of issues there are on the labor side. It includes even the very large number of holidays we have in India compared with anybody else. Relatively short hours of work that we have compared with others. Because of all this, I do not think India has a great advantage in the labor intensive sector, which the government claims it wants to promote, and yet your labor laws do not really promote that. So that is the real problem. Your own labor laws, not the trade barriers in Europe, not the trade barriers in the UK. And we would have to do something about that. Auto ancillaries, I think, we can certainly have a move up. The British car industry has disappeared in terms of British names, but the multinationals of the world are there, certainly the Japanese and Korean companies, and we can certainly export to there. And hopefully at some point of time, we will even be able to export to Jaguar, which is, of course, is very high-end in terms of the auto parts, but Tata owns it. And I would say in terms of cars themselves, we have a comparative advantage in small cars. We are not competitive in large cars, but we are definitely competitive in small cars. Countries in Europe, in England, for them, small cars are preferable, whereas in the USA, it's large cars. Small cars are preferable because of very high prices of petrol and because of a lack of parking spaces. Americans have huge parking spaces for their large things. The Britain and Europe have much, much more constrained. So I think, our small car exports, they should have a chance of rising significantly. It will also depend, of course, on what happens to the tariffs of various rivals. Malaysia, Thailand, China, all of these are competitors now in some of the small car areas. So I'm not sure what will happen out there. But if we have a good deal, if we have a very low tariff regime and they don't, that will clearly give us a benefit in the UK.
Mr. Ayer, does the FTA lay groundwork for wider cooperation in technology, green energy and mobility? Will it also help boosting investments in meaningful way according to you?
Okay, there are a number of issues. As far as investment is concerned, will this help mutual investment? Will this help Indian investment in the UK? Will it help British investment in India? I am not sure to what extent it will boost British investment in India. The reason, as I said, is that Britain hardly produces many goods anymore. It used to be a large exporter of goods, but it has substantially deindustrialized and become a services sector. So it will be wanting to do something more on the services sector, which we should allow because, we are competitive in services. We should allow them to come in. But again, if somebody comes into the services data with a GCC, it will not involve very much investment. It will certainly generate revenue. It will help generate skills. It will be a skilling of the Indian workforce. There will be exports involved, but don't expect very heavy investment. It doesn't take a lot of heavy investment to start an R&D center into artificial intelligence. So that is the kind of thing I think the British may be investing in India. India could invest. I mean, as you know, India is one of the biggest investors in the UK. The Tata Group is the largest single employer in the private sector in the entire United Kingdom. I mean, it has TCS, it has Jaguar, and it has its steel plant out there. And those together are a massive amount of investment, a massive amount of jobs. Will that trend increase? Yes, it could increase. But as I said, that is now fundamentally a services economy. It is no longer a place which is a large-scale producer of merchandise. So Indian companies like TCS, which are already well established, can they increase their footprint? Yes, I should think so. Especially now that you have these new freedoms in regard to the social security deductions. Earlier on, a very significant part of if an IT worker went there, a significant part of his salary was cut, saying this is a social security contribution, although he would never get it back as a pension in his old age. Now that that is being waived for 3 years, we will be able to send lots more people for up to 3 years. And this, I think, should induce much more Indian investment in the IT sector there. I hope that happens. It looks promising. Of course, the other things are, will there be more Indian writers for Financial Times and The Economist, or will there be more Indian footballers going into the Premier League, some of these areas? And of course, there is the stock market. I mean, Britain is a highly financialized market with a huge stock market. It already has a significant number of Indian names that are already well known. I imagine that number could go up. How many of them would retain a close connection with India? I am not sure, but you could hope that a significant number of people go there and they improve their skills, send home remittances, and later on perhaps come back and open businesses here. So that is what we look forward to, something happening two-way. And on this, frankly, I see more scope for Indian investment in the UK than the other way around.
Point taken, but beyond numbers, does this FTA signal a deeper shift in India's global trade priorities, especially as negotiations with the US still underway? Also, where do you think this deal between India and US is facing the roadblock?
Very often you find that the thing that holds up trade agreements are not the important parts. It is the relatively unimportant parts. That I think would be true in the case of the British thing about, if you ask me, allowing Scotch whisky at 75% should not be a big deal, but it was resisted greatly for quite some time. So we have these issues with the USA, which is a very large-scale agricultural exporter. So there is no difficulty on our opening up, I think, to American manufacturers. There again, it is not a large-scale exporter of manufacturers, save in the very, very high-tech sectors. So let us see. I would say that the kind of things that they are insisting in, they want an opening up into the Indian market for common agricultural goods grown by farmers, subsistence farmers, including wheat and maize. And we are very reluctant to get into a situation where they would have the ability to flood our markets. They gave significant subsidies and helps to their own farmers. So we do not want a position where our farmers could be flooded with very cheap food grain from there. And we are very worried about their milk sector. There again, they are highly competitive. We are saying that we have these millions of farmers in the milk system, and what happens if their livelihoods are smashed? So in some other sectors, like the various different kinds of nuts and fruits, I think we should open up. That should be no difficulty at all. The agricultural sector is, I think, a thorny issue. I am not sure there will be an easy resolution of that. They on the one hand saying that we must open up to areas like maize, where, for instance, they produce genetically modified seeds, and we don't want to allow that. We have not looked at that here, and yet all the big, the vast majority of maize there are much more thorny. I do not necessarily see a quick end to that. That's why there has been a proposal. Let's have an interim agreement on the areas where there is already agreement and put off the areas where there is disagreement. Because even if that second part is put off for a long area, you can say, nevertheless, you can claim victory on the limited areas where you have reached agreement. So that looks to be the way it's going. But I repeat, the trade deal with the USA will be much more difficult than with the UK.
Mr. Aiyar, last question before we let you go, and we rarely get to speak to you. How can we let you go without asking you on Trump's latest policy? Is he going to be doing a decent job now?
You see, one of the things that has come is that he's being called TACO. TACO stands for Trump always chokes out. He announces big things and then he retreats, announces big things and he retreats. And if he always does that, the market is now no longer as afraid as it was initially. Because they say, all these great positions, historically, every statement of a president would be examined with great attention to find small little nuances that may have changed. Now they say for the first time we have a guy, he makes big announcement and everybody says, don't take it seriously, let's go and have another drink. So this is the situation we are in. So on the one hand, the markets and the economists, everybody was initially very, very worried. Now they say, he puts it off. At first he said April, then he said August. Let us get to August. People say now he'll say September. In fact, there was a cartoon, a very funny cartoon, somebody asking Trump, what about never? Does never work for you in terms of finally striking these deals? So as I said, there is less apprehension than before. Nevertheless, there is no question that tariffs have gone up very substantially. And people thought this will have a huge effect on inflation. That has not happened. Why has it not happened? The real reason is that, the moment Trump got elected in November last year, everybody knew that tariffs are going to go up. This is a big thing. So all importers have been stockpiling enormous amounts of imports before the tariffs went up. Because of this, the huge inventories of relatively cheap goods are available for at least 6 months, I would say. So we are not going to see the effect of that inflation immediately, but you bet your boots that by the end of the year, we will begin to see it. It is not a small amount by which they have raised the prices. Not only that, the dollar itself has depreciated, and even that depreciation will tend to raise the price of imports. So if you ask me, as of now, it looks as though things are very good. So I do think that in the longer run, by the end of his term, I think he will turn unpopular because he would have done the economy a significant amount of damage. He will look good for a year or two but even two, I think, would be difficult. So let us see. If the economy is doing badly by the autumn of 2026, and if he then has a big loss in the midterm congressional elections in the USA, then a lot of his power can vanish. But if he doesn't suffer those losses, believe me, he will continue as he is, and he will continue with what he is doing. It is unconstitutional, basically.
All right, Mr. Aiyar, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining at this hour and explaining and analyzing India-UK FTA. But with this, it's time for a wrap in this edition of a special show. Thanks for joining in, and we'll continue to analyze and decode India-UK FTA.